suppose I am not maintaining, failures are going to occur. So what are the types of failures? The first one is temperature dependent failures. That is, whatever failure that occurs is going to be directly related to the temperature. If my temperature is beyond a particular limit, then it's a problem. Okay. Now coming to this, I'll give you a simple example. You can consider an auditorium or your classroom. Okay, everything will be having a capacity, a seating capacity. Say if I consider this room, it's going to be some 20 members inside this room. What if I'm going to dump more than 20? What if I'm going to push 50 persons inside this room? The first issue will be there's going to be not enough number of seats to sit. The second, you'll feel a congestion. The major thing is discomfort, human discomfort, which means your air conditioning unit is not able to produce the cooling capacity that it was designed to. Now what has gone to the AC? Has it gone to a shutdown condition? No. That is because we have exceeded the limit. So every individual person has a capacity of generating heat. Now here you can see, say one human body is able to give about 100 watts. Suppose 100 students are put in a classroom, and what will be the amount of heat generated? It is 10,000 watts. So the air conditioning system which is designed for that particular room should be able to produce a cooling effect higher than that of this 10,000 watts. You get the point? So this is how the discomfort initially starts, and then it leads to a threshold. Okay. So though the product is properly designed, if the heat is not controlled, so these are all the effects. Now coming to temperature dependent mechanical failures. You can see a figure of assembly here. Okay, a bolt nut, screw nut assembly. Here you can see that beyond a particular condition, if I start applying load, what happens? So it is going to meet its threshold level, and finally it's going to break out. Likewise, the materials which are used inside our electronic equipments will definitely have its own tensile strength or whatever yield strength, etc. So if it reaches, if the temperature is going to burden that particular component beyond the limit, then definitely it will break up. So that is called as mechanical failure. The next, here you can see, I've given one example. So how to beat up the mechanical failure, or how to tolerate, okay, the mechanical failure is, through some design changes we can do it. Now you can see the first case, I have mounted a metal rod on two ends, okay. Here you can see I have placed joints. So this is roller joint. I have placed a metal rod on two roller joints. When the metal is being heated, this rod is being heated, it will have a tendency to expand. So you can see the length which is being extended to LE, right? When the same metal rod is going to be cooled, it is going to compress. So you can see that it is compressed. So because of successive heating and cooling, you will notice that the actual length is being expanded, and then it is compressed. Just because we have placed rollers at the ends, at the two ends, it's very sufficient and comfortable for the metal rod to go like this and then come back like this, right? So there is no destruction in the rod, right? Here you can see the case of rigid joints. In the rigid joint, you can see the absence of the rollers, right? There are no rollers. So in this case, if I heat, what happens? You can see a deformation in the shape of the metal rod. Can you see? So it's getting bent outwards. You look at the two ends, you will see the bend outwards. Here in case of cooling, you will see that it is bent inwards, right? So this is simply a metal bar which is mounted on a roller joint as well as on a rigid joint, just to show you how it is able to take up the deformation in its configuration, right? So this type of small design changes can actually help you to tackle with the issues that occurs due to varying temperature conditions. The next is dissimilar materials. That is, you have an important term called as coefficient of thermal expansion. I will be calling it as CTE from this slide onwards. So why this is important, I will tell you. Every material has got its own unique properties, right? So one such property is called as CTE. This thermal expansion will actually tell you, if you are going to heat a material by 1 degree Celsius, what is going to be the change in the length. That deformation, that is measured by this term alpha, okay, and you call it as CT. So it is nothing but the rate of expansion or contraction of unit length of material per unit change in its temperature. For 1 unit change in temperature, how much is the change in length, right? So this is called as CT. Here I have given an example of two dissimilar materials. I have shown with different shades. So in this you will notice that once it is heated, you can see they get deformed like this, and here also you can see the curve patterns which are followed. Okay, so whatever value of CTE this material has, accordingly it will deform. What the upper material has, accordingly it will deform, right? And this is actually measured in ppm, that is parts per million per degree Celsius. This is how it is measured. So for an example, I say a material A is having a CTE of, say I am taking silicon itself. Okay, say if silicon is having, for example, a CTE of 20 ppm per degree Celsius, then in such a case, it means that for 1 meter long of that silicon material, if I heat it by 1 degree Celsius, it is going to deform by 0.02 mm. Right? That is nothing but 20 into 10 power minus 6. I told you nanometer, right? So, sorry, it's not that. So it's 0.02 mm. Right? Now, I have taken an example of one assembly. This is nothing but a plastic molded package. Right? Here I have taken two patterns. The first one is actually a wire bonded assembly. The second one is a flip chip package. In this wire bonded, you will notice that the wires, dies, the substrate, all are interlinked with each other. Right? Now, suppose my substrate, say these three are made of different materials. So obviously, all the three will have a different CTE value. Suppose the substrate is heated. It is under some high temperature. And this material has started to deform. This heat, since they are in connection with each other, there will be conduction heat transfer. So this, the heat from the substrate will be transferred to this wire, and this will also undergo a deformation. Again, from this to the die attached, there will be some deformation. So every individual components that are put in this setup, right, they get mutually affected as they are interlinked with each other. Suppose I am going for this type of flip chip metallic package. Again, you have a different setup, but still here also you notice that they are linked. So what I wish to say is, though the materials are of different CTE, the deformation of one will definitely affect, because there is conduction heat transfer. So in a sequence, everything will be affected. Okay. Now, dies are usually made of different types of materials: silicon, germanium, gallium, arsenide. So when I say die fracture, these materials undergo some CTE values, that is deformation or expansion or compression due to temperature, and they finally collapse. That is called as die fracture. Next, you have the temperature dependent corrosion failures. We all know what is corrosion. Okay, it's not a new term to us. So any material that is simply exposed to the atmosphere, it gets reacted with the moisture in the atmosphere and it loses its properties. This is a simple corrosion, right? Now, this corrosion is applicable here also. Whenever the temperature rises, again they are subjected to more chances of corrosion failure. So the first one is dry corrosion and the second one is wet corrosion. In case of dry corrosion, there is no water medium, there is no moisture involved. I'll tell you when this happens. It will happen whenever there is a small crack. This crack is going to lead to a fatigue, and development of this fatigue will result in dry corrosion. Whereas in case of wet corrosion, there will be a presence of an electrolyte. Right? There will be some ions, say chlorine ion or sodium ion, and they are called as ion contaminants. These contaminants, when they react to the moisture, they result in corrosion. So this is called as wet corrosion. So either being a dry or a wet corrosion, in case of semiconductor chips, this is resulted because of rise in temperature only. Then we have temperature dependent electrical failures. When I say electrical failures, it can be intermittent or permanent. The two types I have given here. The first one is thermal runaway, that is on resistance of power transistors. This will actually increase in temperature. When the temperature increases, the switch on resistance is right, so that will increase. So beyond a certain limit, you will undergo this thermal runaway. That is again, the equipment is put to off condition. The next is electrical overstress. Actually, the material which is used, say silicon, when it is heated up, that is temperature rises and therefore the resistance level will come down. Electrical resistance will come down and therefore higher current flow. So that is called as electrical overstress. So this will result in heating up of the junction, which is again a drastic effect. And the third one is ionic contamination and electromigration. These two are somewhat closer to each other. That is, if there are some number of mobile charged ions. You know what is ions? I told you, say Na plus Cl minus. They get charged and they move from one place to another. Okay, they are actually dislocated. So that is called as ion contamination. They go and settle down here and there. So that is a problem coming here. Whereas electron migration is too many ions that are leaving from the field where they are supposed to be and migrated to some other place. So loss of these ions, that will again result in power failure. So these are the 4 problems that are expected from the electrical part. Now coming to the importance of heat transfer in electronics. So any electronic component, only 2 things we will expect. One is increased performance. We need it to perform drastically, right? Even more than what it is expected. The second one is extended lifetime. You are sold with a product that is that has an expiry period, say 5 years. We will expect it at least for 6 years, right? That's a normal mentality. So that is, for example, the computer tech-savvy people. What do? Gamers. Normally, when they purchase a CPU, they will replace the heat sink in that CPU with some cooling, extra cooling. Some of this is modules which are available in the market, right? So this is mainly to increase the life of the CPU. And here we have another term called as the mean time between the failures, that is MTBF. So this is nothing but a parameter that is used to describe the average life of an equipment, right? So this is actually dependent on C by T, that is exponential to the power C by T. C is it's a system constant, T is the temperature. So it's exponential of inverse of the temperature. Actually, this MTBF and system reliability are inversely related. That is, more this value, reliability will be less. Lesser this value, reliability will be more. Right? Now, this is the final part of this lecture, that is the thermal design process. Now we have understood that we have to manage this temperature, dissipate the heat properly. This cannot be done at the later stage. We will have to do it in the design stage itself. Even in the design stage, what type of material you are going to choose, what is the material property, whether it can withstand the operating temperature window, then whether it is being tested, and what type of test, whether it is simply a engineering verification test or it's a design verification test. So all these things put together forms the design process, thermal design process. So you can see initially we are taking the design concept, the requirements of the customer. Okay, so any product which is launched in the market, we are more worried about whether the customer is satisfied, whether what they want. Accordingly only we make design changes, right, in the improved version of the products. So requirements, feasibility study, whether it's really possible. Next we have the middle level architecture, the higher level architecture. I'll explain the difference between those two in the next slide. And here we have the detailed design. Now what I would like to mention in this flowchart is you have a two-way arrow marks only here and here. What does it mean? This is the engineering verification test. After all these initial phase of design and detailed design, if it goes to EVT test, it has to pass that EVT test. If it doesn't pass, then the product is again pushed back to this stage, revision is made, and then it is again tested. Likewise, once the product has moved on to the DVT, that is design verification test, if there is a failure here, the product has failed to pass in this test, it is again moved on to the detailed design. Right? Here again some design verifications will be done and finally it comes. Now after completing these two processes, when it is moving for the certification test, that is you call it as a UL certification, under workers laboratory. So that certification test, if it is failed, then the total system or the equipment is a failure only. You cannot do any design changes, you'll have to just trash it and move for a further advanced invention or improved version. So this is how you get the final product. Here I have listed some design requirements. So when I design and thermal requirements are listed. So design requirements will come under the preliminary category only. That is what design concept, what the market segment the product is intended for, and the environment in which we are going to actually use those products, any safety precautions to be followed or implemented in that product, and industrial standards. We are aware of all these ASTM standards, so those things, that alone will be given in the design. The next is thermal design. So this is where you have the middle level architecture and the high level architecture. So since we are more worried about temperature, we are focusing more on this thermal design. The first one is power dissipation of the product. How much of power has to be dissipated and what is the power dissipation per board Suppose there are many components, the major component which is contributing more power, that has to be focused, and acceptable dimensions of the board. So these things all will be covered in the mid-level architecture. Coming to the high-level common designs, that is, say you take a unit, okay, a very simple AC unit. What about the inlet? What about the exhaust? Where are you going to place it? How many airflow distributions are there? So how many fans are you going to install? Suppose there are more than 3 or 4 fans. If 2 are not working, even then are the other 2 able to accomplish the task? So those things has to be calculated and then decided in the high level architecture. So heat generated and other cooling solutions, of course. So these are all encountered in the entire design process. So I think I made the concepts clear, the very basic concepts of semiconductor industry. In our future lecture, we will continue from where we have left. Thank you so much.